Good evening, everybody. I welcome tonight Father James Ratu from St. John's Church in Farncombe to say prayers for us this evening. And I would suggest that as this is a serious Christmas tide, that we stand for our prayers. Shall we stand?
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord of us all, we ask your blessing on the borough of Waverley with all its diversity. The souls who call it home, the people who come here to work, the children of its schools and the old, the towns and the villages that make it up. May harm and danger be far from it, so that its people can pursue all that makes their lives worthwhile. Lord, all the created world serves you, and we are aware of our common nature as your children. Please strengthen us and all those elected to public office in this borough for the work we are called to do, to listen with a desire to find the best way forward. We pray for those who work for this borough and serve its people and purposes, and for them we pray diligence, steadfastness, and care. Lord, we thank you for all those across this borough who give up their time and energies to serve others, people of many different faiths and none. May no act of kindness in this community go unrewarded in your sight. Great God, as Christmas draws closer, we remember that you come to share our earthly life. We pray for the continued fruitfulness of the earth, which we cannot survive without. Strengthen us to take the steps we must to preserve it. Help us to share the good things we have and the abilities we possess, and to defend all that is right and good, so that all your children may flourish. And in a world where peace seems far away from so many who are your children, where violence and conflict scar and destroy lives, we pray for peace in our communities, so far as depends on us. Lord, whatever befalls us, give us the gifts of generosity, truthfulness, and kindness we need to nurture now and in the times to come. And so, gathering together all our prayers and praises, we use the familiar words that Jesus taught us. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, James. And may I add thanks also for you and the congregation of St. John's for hosting and for leading the Waverley Mayor's Carol service last Sunday. It was very much appreciated. Thank you. And you're very welcome to stay for as long or as little as you'd like. So we come to agenda item number 1, which is to welcome you all and to say, and to welcome members of the public as well, if they're in the gallery or on Zoom. Members, please raise your hand to indicate whether you wish to speak, and you'll be operating your own microphones. If you can't hear, please indicate. This meeting will be live streamed, and you'll be using your electronic voting systems on the consoles in front of you. When a vote is called for, they will light up, and that enables you to vote. For is on the left, abstain is in the middle, and against is on the right. We can also do recorded votes if they are supported by 5 other members, and we will do that via a roll call in the normal way. We can also do general assent in the normal way. Speeches will be timed at 4 minutes. You will be given a 30-second warning before your time is up. You may speak only once on each item, except in circumstances as set out in Procedure Rule 14.6. If you're making a point of order, please be clear about which rule or law you think has been breached and how, and wait for agreement before you proceed. So now we come to apologies. Kissy, are there any?
We've had apologies from Councillor Townsend.
Thank you very much. And the minutes, members, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on 17th of October are published online and have been circulated with the agendas. Councillor Crowe.
You'll all have heard of Schrodinger's cat. Well, I think I'm Schrodinger's crow, because in the minutes I am noted as absent, but in fact I was here, which is quite remarkable. And I just wanted to assure you all that I was here.
Well, as crows fly. Thank you, that was duly noted. Duly noted. Two places at once. With that proviso, do we accept the minutes? Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? None? Thank you. And Mayor's announcements. Since the last council, it's been a time of sports awards in Godalming and Farnham, of many school visits to King Edward's, St Catherine's, Charterhouse, Broadwater, Farncombe Infant School and Godalming Junior School, and very many carol services in Farnham, the Age UK Surrey one in Guildford Cathedral, St Hilary's in the Minster Church in Godalming, the Meath's carol service yesterday at St Clement Danes, right up in the city, and our own Waverley carol service held in the lovely Church of St John's, Farncombe last Sunday. And I thank those councillors who supported that civic occasion. And I thank you also for wearing Christmas jumpers in aid of the Meath's Yule Fuel Appeal. Those who are decked in festive garb, thank you for your £10 donation. And those who aren't, and I've already spoken to one who suggested that he might double the donation because he hasn't been wearing his festive garb this evening. So I hope that's the trend for those who are not wearing festive garb, that you consider a £20 donation. There are 50 councillors, there's one apology, so we should be able to give the Meath at least £500 from this evening. It will be warmly received, but I just have to say that it is a cold reflection on our times that charities such as the Meath have to beg for winter warmth. Agenda item 5, leaders' announcements. Leader.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members. Good evening, guests. I have a few updates to make this evening in advance of the main meeting. First of all, can I say massive thank you to all of the Waverley staff who assisted with the delivery of our State of the Borough meeting regarding water. We could not have done any of that without you and your support. And the feedback I've had from residents has been very positive. We will, of course, be talking a little bit more about water this evening as part of the motion later on. Secondly, I would like to update Council as to the progress of the recruitment for a new joint chief executive for Waverley Borough and for Guildford Borough. We have had a really excellent recruitment round for the role with 21 applications, 10 of which met our more specific criteria for the role, and now 5 of which have been shortlisted for the technical assessment, stakeholder panels, and the Joint Appointments Committee interviews that take place on Thursday afternoon. If the Joint Appointments Committee recommends a candidate, that person will be on the papers for the special full council that is arranged for next Tuesday, the 19th of December. Thirdly, I was going to speak about the Edge, but as there's an item on the question that I will cover that in response to the question from Councillor Barker-Lomax. And finally, actually not quite finally, I'm going to say this one first. One of the things I had not factored into wearing a Christmas jumper was the temperature in this chamber. And I think perhaps I may have paid 20 to avoid it, but now I'm here, I'm going to stay with it. But no, my final point tonight, I would like to announce some changes to the executive that will take place from January the 2nd, 2024. I'm sure that he will say more in a moment, and I'm going to make sure he's taken last so that he can express his views. It's my sad duty to report that Councillor Peter Clark will be stepping down as deputy leader and from the executive from the beginning of January. He will be sorely missed by us all on the executive, and I want to thank him very much for his work and his service both to his community and also to this administration and Waverley Borough Council. Councillor Tony Fairclough will become the Deputy Leader of the Council from that date, and Councillor George Murray will assume the vacant Farnham residence seat as per the agreement between the Liberal Democrats and the Farnham residents. I will circulate the details of updated portfolio holders and roles in the early part of the new year. I will now hand over to my colleagues, starting with Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Leader. I suspect this evening a lot of people are going to be paying deserved tribute to Peter Clarke for what he has done over the past 2.5 years. No longer than that, I think, Peter. I'd like to break with protocol and hopefully thank Peter for what he is going to do going forward, which is to mentor me. I will be leaning very heavily on his experience and his advice, and I have absolutely no doubt that he will be an excellent mentor to me. So in advance, Peter, thank you going forward, and thank you for all you've done.
Councillor Victoria Keel.
Thank you, Leader. I would just also like to thank Peter for all that he has contributed to the executive, and I wish him all the best. Just a short update from myself. The Joint Governance Committee for Guildford and Waverley has been meeting as a smaller subgroup over the past couple of weeks to review the collaboration risk register with the view that a revised and more streamlined version be taken to the full group in January. Thank you.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. If I may, I'd just like to publicly add my farewells to Councillor Clarke, who will be missed, and thank him for the constructive and very good humoured way that we've conducted business. Congratulations to Councillor Fairclough, and a welcome to Councillor Murray, who I know will be a credit to the administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Paul Rivers.
Thank you, Leader. I'll leave my few remarks to agenda item 9 on the HRA, but it's been great working with Peter, and I hope I will continue to do so when there are difficult questions that I'm sure only he can answer.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Leader. I'd also like to add my thanks to Peter Clarke. It's been really great working with you, and he's not going far, but and I'm sure that you know, he will continue to provide some good humour at meetings from the backbenches, and congratulations to Tony as well for taking on the role of Deputy Leader, and welcome to George as well. Just a short update, as you are aware, the High Court upheld our decision to adopt Local Plan Part 2 rather, sorry, and the claim for the statutory review has been dismissed, and the claimants have not sought permission to appeal. And also, we were awarded costs as well. So that is very good news for the council. I'd like to thank all of the officers involved in from the planning policy team, and especially Andrew Longley and Matthew Ellis and Catherine Dove for their hard work during the whole process. There was an awful lot of detail that I have to gather together. And I'd also like to thank our cornerstone barristers, Wayne Beglan and Jack Barber as well, who represented us throughout the challenge. And I would just say that now the team are solely focusing on the provision, gathering of evidence for our new local plan. And obviously that is something that's very important to this council, and something for the borough for over the next 20 years as well. I'd also like to thank Waverley for helping to set up the hospital hopper service for Cranley. It's a really important door-to-door service which will take residents to the Royal Surrey County Hospital or other medical establishments as well in between Cranley and Guildford. And for those of you who know Cranley, we don't particularly have a very good public transport system. So this will be really important, and it's been going now for a week, and we've already had some very happy customers, and I'm very much hoping that, you know, that will expand and it will become a really valuable resource and service for the residents of Cranley and the surrounding villages as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Williams, not last today.
No, thank you, Leader. And first of all, my apologies to the Mayor for not wearing a Christmas jumper. I will take up the Mayor's offer and allocate the funding that would have enabled me to buy a Christmas jumper to the funding pot. So yeah, so I'll certainly be doing that. And well, I haven't got anything to report as such, but I would again like to add my personal thanks to Peter Clark for he was described, I think, by Mark as being good-humoured, and I would certainly add to that his sense of humour, which will be sadly missed. So I wish you well for the future, Peter, and know that, and please know that you will be very much there in the background as we deliberate on executive. I'd also like to welcome Tony as deputy leader, and also welcome George to the executive as well, and they will be great, both of them, in their new roles. So really look forward to that as we go into the new year. Thank you.
And last but not least, Councillor Clark.
Who needs a Christmas jumper when you've got a red face? Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hope you don't mind if I stand up to talk about while I'm standing down. Also, it gives me a final opportunity to look down upon the leader. Very rare for most of us. I appreciate we have a long agenda for this evening. So I assume, Madam Mayor, that the presentation of my short service award is being postponed to any other business. As some members of the previous administration know, I've been suffering with a back issue, rather uncomfortable, for some years now. And despite several surgical interventions and cash injections, it's not really improved. And I've now been advised to stand back and accept lighter duties. But living with pain can be overcome. And to some extent, it's about mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Now, it says here that I will miss working with my fellow executive colleagues. In the 4 years that I've been in the executive, we've all been so busy and preoccupied that I've never really had the opportunity or the time to say how much you all mean to me. But moving on quickly, there is no job description for the role of deputy leader, but what you do get very quickly is an appreciation of the sheer volume and breadth of work done by this council for our residents, which is a credit to the directors, the management, the officers, and the staff of the council, which I'd like to say thank you. I've had the opportunity to strike up friendships with both officers and councillors. Even one or two members of the opposition seem friendly enough. And I would also like as my colleague said, to take this opportunity to both endorse and congratulate Councillor Fairclough and Councillor Murray in their new appointments. Since they were elected in May of this year, their enthusiasm and commitment has been clear to many of us. But this also applies to many of the new members in the chamber. And I even include new members of the opposition in that endorsement. Enthusiasm, however misguided on occasions it may be. Madam Mayor, I've always found that a sense of humour goes a long way to keep the wheels oiled and turning within any organisation. We should all remember that life is too short And if you can't laugh at yourself, give me a call. I'm happy to help. I'm not going to disappear altogether. The good people of Recklesham and Rowledge in Farnham have another 3 years to put up with me. Finally, you could say that I'm under new management now. Just give my wife a call for details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Leader, do you want to?
Only to say thank you on behalf of the executive to Peter, and I'm sure on behalf of all the members of the council. And with that, I conclude Leader Exec updates and hand back to the Mayor.
Thank you. So we come to agenda item number 6, which is questions from members of the public. And there are 2 questions received and published and circulated. The first is from Mr. Grisel, who's not here to ask. Is he? No. So Leader, you've read the question. Are you happy to respond?
I am indeed, Madam Mayor, thank you. And although this would normally sit with the portfolio holder, Mr. Gazelle is actually a resident within my ward, and I have been discussing this with officers myself. I'm aware, Mr. Gazelle, that you've met with Dan Pamphlet, who is the officer closest to this matter. I have also met with him to discuss. I agree with you that in an ideal world, we would sweep this road more often, and particularly in line with the contract that we have with Biffa. However, to do this properly, cars need to be moved, and this will seriously inconvenience residents or lead to an inefficient clean if we're having to do that multiple times a year. That being said, this all or nothing approach does not feel acceptable to me either, and I know it doesn't to you. And it is also not in line with the contract that we have with Biffa to provide the cleaning services. So I will be asking officers to identify a time of day where there are regularly less cars. And let's be honest, I think in most residential areas, there are times where there are regularly less cars. And I will ask officers to ascertain what level of clean they are able to undertake outside of the 1 or 2 that are done with cars being moved by residents. I will confirm this with you and Dan Pamphlet by email tomorrow morning, Mr. Gazelle. Thank you.
Don't think that Mr. Edmonds is here either. So, Leader, are you happy to respond to his question?
I'm always happy to respond to questions from former Councillor Brian Edmonds. Peter Clark will also chip in, I think, at the end of this one with your indulgence, Madam Mayor. At present, we have no formally structured surgeries for executive members, just as there are no formally structured surgeries for members in general. Many of us informally run surgeries as ward councillors, and all executive members, including myself, are always available by appointment both to the public and members in this chamber. I will, however, investigate the other ways that council structure this. Certainly Surrey and Hampshire and others do seem to have some kind of formal mechanic for surgeries for executive or cabinet members. So I will go and have a look at how they do that and what the mechanism is. And I'll certainly bring that to the executive to consider in the new year. Councillor Clark, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Leader. During the council period of 2019 to 23, when both Mr. Edmonds and I were ward councillors for Recklesham and Rowledge, I don't recollect any demand from our residents for surgeries. In fact, our residents seemed quite content to contact me via telephone or email. And if necessary, I would arrange to meet them, and often did. Nor do I recollect at any time during this 4-year period, Mr. Edmonds suggesting that surgeries were something we should consider. My conclusion, therefore, is there is no demand for surgeries in our ward, and I don't appreciate that anything has changed in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you. So we come now to agenda item 7, which is questions from members of the council. We have 1 question, so I call upon Councillor Baker-Lomax to ask your question.
Thank you. At the executive meeting on 28th November, Councillor Mary-Louise referred to a memorandum of articles between Waverley Borough Council and Surrey County Council and stated that she expected the Edge to reopen by early December. Can the leader confirm that the heads of terms for the Edge between Waverley Borough Council and Surrey County Council referred to in the council meeting in October and November have now been signed? Can the leader further confirm that the full agreement between Waverley and Surrey will be signed this week, namely the week commencing 11th December? And finally, can the leader now guarantee, in line with Councillor Mary-Louise's forecast, that the Edge will be made available to clubs in December And if not, when can he guarantee that the clubs will have access?
Thank you. Leader, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And as well as trying to respond to the specific question from Councillor Bark-Lomax, as I was going to talk a little bit about the Edge in my update, I will try and flesh this out a little bit in general. So thank you, Councillor Bark-Lomax, for your question. This is my second go today about trying to have a discussion about the Edge following a fairly unpleasant session this morning at Surrey County Council's full council this morning. And I will endeavour to address your question with more decorum than I received this morning in response to my own. For lots of reasons, much of the legwork in regards to the arrangements around the Edge have been picked up by Waverley. So in particular, the formulation and construction of an operating model, the contractual issues, the assets, the paperwork in general. Now, as a result, Surrey County Council have not really had to go through any particular governance processes of their own because they're not actually putting things through their council to do a thing. We are. So there is a disproportionate amount of governance having to go through Waverley versus Surrey at present. So Surrey obviously own the building and Surrey could have, if they wanted to, for example, have directly contracted out to the Walmer Hill Sports Association and decided not to. And I think they recognised that in their particular land and properties team, they didn't have the sort of expertise regarding sports and leisure that perhaps Waverley did. And it was agreed that, again, Waverley would take that on. I have therefore been a little bit disappointed to see the kind of critique coming out of, for example, the MP or the portfolio holder, sorry, the cabinet member at Surrey regarding the speed of this council's work on the subject, because it's very clear that it has been agreed between Waverley and Surrey that the majority of the legal legwork would be done by Waverley. Now, where I'm a little frustrated there is that Surrey has agreed with this position and yet has sought at every point against the commitment I had from the leader of the county council to either politicise or to critique the speed that it's being done, despite the fact that Waverley is having to pick up most of the work. I asked this morning for assurances that the tit-for-tat nonsense and the politicking would stop so that we could resume partnership working for the good of the community, as I was promised several months ago by the leader of Surrey, when he had to personally intervene, and I thank him very much for that intervention, to get Surrey staff into the room at all. What I received back this morning was unfounded claims of being a liar, among other abuse, that will soon be in the hands of the monitoring officer at Surrey. Several members in this room in their Surrey hats bore witness to this morning. However, in answer to your specific question and recognising that the internal governance processes that for a borough council, for any council, can be rather slow, I have asked for the final reports to authorise this to be drafted as a leader's decision, i.e. an executive decision reserved back to myself, so that we can get this done before we stop for Christmas and achieve the things that you are talking about in your question. Members will have seen that this has been added to the forward plan, and I believe as of about 10 minutes ago, I think the report itself is actually now live on ModGov. I will be taking that decision formally on Monday evening or Tuesday morning. I just need to confirm what the time restraints are. I believe I have to wait several days to officially do it. It might be Wednesday, I think the monitoring officer is trying to tell me, so Wednesday morning. Our officers have been in touch with relevant clubs and other stakeholders to make them aware of this process and about when that will happen, at which point we really should be good to go. I hope that answers most of your question, but under the circumstances, Madam Mayor, I would be happy to take any supplementaries with your indulgence. It's up to the Mayor.
Thank you. You do have a supplementary, please do.
Can I ask, please, so Monday evening, Tuesday morning, is that the heads of terms or is that the full agreement?
So it's Wednesday morning, sorry, the monitoring officer is confirming that. I believe it is all of what is necessary to make all of the legal arrangements live with Surrey. That is my understanding of that report. I have only seen a draft version of the report myself rather than the final, but I have been given clear indication of what the report's content is from officers.
So we think it's the full arrangement?
It should be the full arrangements.
And does that include the arrangement with the Walmer Hill Sports Association?
That is my understanding, but until I have the report, I will need to confirm, at which point I am going to hand back to the Mayor now.
Yes, Councillor Bark-Lomax, through the chair, please. And I think that concludes that item. So we come now to agenda item number 8, the General Fund mid-year review. Leader, would you like to move the recommendation, please?
Very pleased to move the recommendation, and with your indulgence, I will also hand over to the seconder to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Apparently I'm seconding, so I'm happy to second this. With this current year's general fund budget, remains broadly on target overall. Inflation still dominates our landscape, and we still have a huge amount of work to do, including on measures like collaboration. to mitigate cost pressures and improve productivity over the medium-term forecast period. As noted in the Chancellor's autumn statement, inflation may be decelerating, but not nearly as fast as forecast. Those higher costs magnify our structural deficit and increase the sustainable measures we need to make to compensate now and in future years. One consequence of higher inflation is higher interest rates, and we have benefited from higher rates received on our Treasury deposits, but even that benefit will disappear as rates fall, even when inflated costs don't. Meanwhile, the higher rates we receive increases the hurdle that capital spending decisions need to pass on top of the cost inflation and higher interest rates payable that they're additionally burdened with. Regardless of the impact of inflation and inflated interest rates, we're also seeing increased demand for our services and a challenging labour market. Inflation is, of course, not a tax. Taxes fund the infrastructure and services that any modern economy needs to function effectively and efficiently. Inflation poisons the markets for the kind of goods, labour, and capital that businesses cannot do without if they are to grow and become profitable in the first place. But inflation can be good for a myopic government that chooses to redirect its inflated tax receipts, billions of pounds of them, in only one dimension, towards its pet projects rather than funding core infrastructure and services just to keep pace with their inflated costs. So it was in this year's autumn statement, which was also deafeningly silent on so much, including the local government funding settlement controlled by the centre that local authorities need to balance our budgets next year and beyond. Not only that, but also once again, we find ourselves in the depths of next year's budget setting cycle without having received from the government the kind of basic information you'd expect local authorities like us to be given in order to plan ahead. So I'd like to thank the team for this update and wish them well over the coming weeks as we learn from the government, typically late, what their funding settlement, our spending powers for next year will look like and how we must budget accordingly. So I invite you to agree the recommendations and note the report. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Back to you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I just crave your indulgence for a moment and offer my congratulations to Peter Clark on standing down, if that's the right way to express the thing. It's been a great privilege to work with you in the last 2.5 years, and I do hope that he will recover perhaps more quickly as a result of not being the deputy leader than he would have been if he continued as the deputy leader. And can I offer my commiserations, my congratulations to Tony Fairclough as he takes up the mantle. It will be fascinating to do business with you. Madam Mayor, I just would like to congratulate the administration and Councillor Merriweather on a very good performance, not only in the past year. The financial performance of Waverley was very good with its surplus of 700,000 last year and the expected surplus of 234,000 this year. And I think within the financial climate that we have today, that's a very creditable performance. So I do offer my congratulations. Of course, we know that a significant part of that performance is the stellar performance of the Treasury Group, taking advantage of higher interest rates. Of course, that's not particularly sustainable going forward, but we would hope that if interest rates come down, then inflation rates will also come down, which will make the thing rather easier. The portfolio holder mentioned the Chancellor. and his attitude to inflation. But I think bringing down inflation is really the most important thing that a Chancellor could be doing at this time. And I'm glad to see that inflation rate is coming down to 4.6%, and even the Bank of England is expecting inflation to fall to 2% next year. And I do note that Councillor Merriweather at the same time is increasing his inflation rate assumptions from 4% to 5% next year. So I shall await with interest to see what he does when he actually brings finally the medium-term financial plan to this council in the early part of next year. He mentions the Chancellor's pet subjects, and well, I think the Chancellor's pet subject is to stimulate the economy. And I think bringing inflation rates down and stimulating the economy, Madam Mayor, is probably the most important thing that he should be doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Beaman.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. A hobby horse of mine. Is there any indication that Waverley will lose any more retained business rates from the miserly level that it currently retains? Thank you.
I'm happy to take that question. Thank you, Councillor Beaman. Not next year. We are told not to expect it next year, but we are still told to plan ahead as if it will happen.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will obviously support the recommendation, but I note under capital projects, paragraph 8.2 on page 27 under assets, which concerns 69 High Street, that the estimated carry forwards required are 4.5 million. This is due to additional reviews taking place on viability, delays in lease arrangements, and in-house resource. Are there more reviews that we didn't know about on viability? And it just shows that really we're not a council that's fit to purchase assets and develop it in this way. We haven't got the human resource, and it seems that the viability is still a problem. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Goodrich. Councillor Merriweather, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe, and I'm sorry I can't pull it up in front of me, but I believe Councillor Goodrich is talking about the outturn report, the position as it was back at the end of the fiscal year, rather than the position as it is now.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Hyman.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yes, quickly on page 23 of our report, the good performance that we've had has been very much down to robust management of staff costs, it tells us, and I quote there, robust management of staff costs. I just wondered, do we intend to continue to do that? Because there appears to be some suggestion that we may be deviating from that policy in a big way. Thanks.
Councillor Merriweather, would you be able to respond?
I'd love to if I understood the question, Madam Mayor.
Okay, are there any other speakers? No other speakers. So I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation for council is to approve this evening is to note the 2023-24 forecast outturn position for the general fund, to note the emerging pressures and risks set out in the report, to note the position regarding the general fund capital programme and individual capital projects. Leader, did you want to sum up or respond?
No, I believe that Councillor Merriweather has answered the questions, certainly all the ones that were questions.
Thank you. So shall we do our electronic voting, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is 45 in favour, none against and none abstentions.
Thank you very much. So that is carried. Agenda item number 9 is the Housing Revenue Account mid-year review. Leader, would you like to introduce and move the recommendation, please?
Many thanks again, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to present this and ask with your indulgence that the Councillor Merriweather introduce the HRA and to second.
Thank you, Leader. Hello again, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second. I'm even happier not really to have to add anything to the remarks I've just made, but rather hand over to Councillor Rivers, who will have more details to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rivers.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, firstly, thank you to Candice and the financial team for producing such a legible report. I'm not sure that all the numbers were ones that I could see, but I have total trust in the team. As a summary, colleagues, this housing revenue account, its mid-year review outlines the latest projections for the housing revenue account 30-year business plan. 30-year business plan. Lots can happen in 30 years. We are indeed going through a volatile time now. This report, this review highlights the emerging pressures on the HRA revenue and capital budgets and estimates their impact on the HRA service delivery and long-term forecast. Factors influencing the HRA are both within our control and beyond our control. Nothing is easy in this world. The key risks facing the HRA business plan, therefore, are inflation and interest rates. Whether the government will bring in a cap on rent increases as they did a year or two ago, what the changes to regulation that affects us and the associated costs of these changes in regulations might be, which we don't know. And I'm referring here to the Social Housing Regulation Act, which received royal assent in July of this year. Now, as at Q2, the HRA was forecasting a net saving of £65,000, but pressures continue. We see increases in housing void rent loss and the associated costs associated with voids, currently totaling around £300,000 for the year. However, one good news item is an overachievement, if that's the right word, an overachievement on investment income of approximately £312,000, an addition of £312,000 for the year. Looking forward, the need for additional borrowing on debt remains. During the last strategic review, during the 2022-23, a strategic review was undertaken during which all assumptions within the then business plan were reviewed and where necessary, they were revised. One of the outcomes of this review was that additional borrowing of around 26 million would be needed over the next 12 years. In light of current interest rates, however, there is the potential to try to reduce and where possible delay this borrowing requirement. We will see. The members of the Landlord Services Advisory Board Executive Working Group will be receiving some financial training and guidance tomorrow to look better at the HRA mid-year review early next year. And this training will help to equip us to consider the HRA budget in January. Rent is not always a four-letter word unless you can't afford it. And annual rent increases are capped under the current rent standard by September CPI. September CPI plus 1%. September CPI has now been released and is 6.7%. Rent is the main sources of income is the main source of income for the business plan, and any changes from the assumption used in the budget setting will have a massive impact on its overall affordability. We collect rent totaling nearly £30 million last year, and for every £1 collected, 20 pence went on housing repairs, 16 pence on programmed maintenance, that's home improvements, a new bathroom, a new kitchen. But 38 pence in every pound was spent on financing. That is on interest and capital payments on loans. And at this time of financial hardship and cost of living difficulties, we need to work with our tenants panel through our officers and the LSAB to ensure that all financial changes coming next year are explained well, and that our tenants understand fully where their rent goes and what their rent does. So, Madam Mayor, thank you for your indulgence, and I am pleased to agree the seconder's recommendation.
Thank you indeed. Do we have any speakers? No speakers. So we come to the recommendation, which is to note the 2023-24 forecast outturn for the position of the housing revenue account, to note the emerging pressures and risks set out in the report, and to note the position regarding the HRA capital programme and new development scheme. Members, would you vote, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is 45 in favour, none abstaining and none against.
Thank you. So that too is carried. And we come to agenda item number 10, which is the Covert Investigative Powers Policy. Leader, may I invite you to introduce and move the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I introduce, I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I first of all thank our legal officers for their work in drafting this document and for incorporating the additional comments of the executive through that process. This has a rather draconian title, I think you'll all agree, but it has very defined purposes. On extremely rare occasions, there is a need for the borough to adopt such power for investigatory purposes. These, of course, must be necessary, lawful and properly authorised, and such action is governed by legislation and subject to further reporting. Such surveillance days can only be used to investigate a suspected crime or disorder under very specific terms as outlined in the summary of the policy. There must be a balancing of the seriousness of the offence and consideration as to if the evidence can be obtained through other means as part of this process. The executive was clear that we needed firm references to human rights protections, particularly Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which have now been included in this document. Let us hope, considering the vote going on tonight in the House of Commons, that such protections for citizens of the United Kingdom are not undermined further. Madam Mayor, this should be rarely used, but when it is used, it's imperative that we have this document to guide that process, and I commend it to Council.
Thank you, Leader. Are there any speakers on this? No? So I guess you don't want to sum up? No? So the recommendation for us tonight is to approve the adoption of the policy. Please vote now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's 46 in favour, none against and none abstentions. Thank you.
So that too is carried. Thank you. Agenda item number 11 is the Homelessness Prevention Strategy 2023 to 28. Leader, would you like to introduce and move the recommendation, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Very happy to introduce and move this motion and to invite Councillor Palmer to second and to present it.
I'm very pleased to second the motion. This addresses one of the key responsibilities of the council, simply to ensure that none of our residents are unable to find a roof over their heads. I'd like to congratulate Michael Rivers and the officer team on their success in bidding for a whole series of grants, and the whole housing team on keeping homelessness so well under control. And it's an issue where Waverley is one of the relatively few councils where we can say that today, very sadly. I do, however, draw attention to the expected reduction in government grant after March 25 by 176,000, that's 44% reduction. It's possible that before then, there will be a change of government to one that gives the issue higher priority. But otherwise, we must be prepared to meet the cost from general funds, as this is an essential task for the council. For now, I hope that all members will be happy to support the update to the homelessness strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Are there, Councillor Goodrich, Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I endorse what has been said about the officers and the excellent record this council has had over many, many years in respect of homelessness. Officer Michael Rivers has done and he still does an excellent job. And when I was more involved in housing, it was always a pleasure to have his reports and to see how successful this council had been compared to other councils, not only in Surrey, but wider afield. And I'd just like to add my congratulations to the officers in regard to the homelessness figures. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too think this is a very good report, Madam Chairman. I just wonder, though, whether the portfolio holder is being a bit speculative. We've got a very clear indication of the funding for this year and for next year from the key homelessness grant. And really, as far as I can see, that it's the year after we're concerned about, but we don't actually know yet, so we can speculate about it. And the government has said that they're going to consider changes of formula, but I suspect that we won't actually know for another year as to what is going to happen. So I just wonder whether we are being a little too gloomy in terms of that. And I'm very glad to see that that we have been able to access various government funding streams. And I note on page 138, the report talks in glowing terms of Waverley successfully accessing the government Next Steps accommodation programme and the Rough Sleeper accommodation programme. And I think that's very good indeed, and well done to the team for doing that. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Crowe.
Thank you very much. I too congratulate officers on this amazing work. It's very heartrending reading, actually, when you get into it, and the case studies were extremely interesting. Thank you very much. I just wanted to just acknowledge the three major challenges that jumped out at me with this report. In 2.3 section 6, it's acknowledged that some homeless households don't benefit from support, particularly benefit anyway, from support via the telephone, i.e. remote support. And I wondered what's being done to increase face-to-face contact, and I appreciate that's easier said than done. And then in the homelessness review, section 12H, I also noted that safeguarding issues are such that they also reduce staff capacity to effectively prevent and relieve homelessness, because so much of the time is taken up by dealing with safeguarding issues. And then 12J, London boroughs placing people in Waverley and taking up spaces. I mean, what is there anything we can actually do about that? I know it sounds horrendously NIMBY-ish, but is there?
Thank you, Lydia. You'd like to respond?
Just to a couple of those comments, and I'm sure Councillor Palmer would following me. We have had to get more safeguarding resource partly because the capacity in other councils that would normally cover those issues is also diminishing, particularly Surrey. So we've already taken the decision at the executive to appoint more safeguarding resource in order to fill some of those gaps. And I honestly feel compelled to just respond to one of the other points just from Councillor Martin, because I think the portfolio holder here is entirely right to speculate that we might need to look for further funding, because we've got perhaps 1 or 2 years grace from the government. There is going to be a general election, but this is also the same year where we've had comments where a minister of the Crown thought it was appropriate to remove homeless people in tents off the street by force. So I think to assume that we will get funding and that homelessness is a lifestyle choice, so to assume that we will get funding from the government beyond 2 years, I think is, you know, not necessarily guaranteed. So I think the portfolio holder is entirely right to speculate about how we fund this going forward, because somebody, of course, needs to. And I will just add my thanks to Mike Rivers and his team for all of the work they do. There is a reason why Waverley is good at this, and it's that team. That's why. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Palmer.
Yes, thank you very much to everyone who's commented on this, and to the unanimous view that the officer team are doing a very good job here. To respond to Councillor Martin, I think in opposition there is a tendency to regard all statements by the governing side to be either too early or too late. And I think it is appropriate to draw attention to a possible looming cut in 2 years' time. And I haven't put it more strongly than that, but we need to be aware of it rather than to hope for the best and then find at short notice that we suddenly need to fill the gap ourselves. I'm grateful as Councillor Crowe for her points. I'd like to discuss some of them separately, but I think on the specific point of handling overflow from other boroughs, we are required to help where we can if the capacity is available. And I think Councillor Crowe would agree that we shouldn't actually have empty properties with people on the street nearby. Obviously, the first priority has to be our own residents. And so far, the team has been very successful. Let's hope it stays that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Leader, would you like to sum up at all?
I think the debate's been well had and would therefore commend that the homelessness strategy to council.
Thank you. So we have to approve the adoption of the homeless strategy policy. Members do vote.
Madam Chair, I think there's one person not voted. Oh, yes. Councillor Wheeldon. Thank you, Madam Chair. So that's 46 in favour, no abstentions and none against.
Thank you. So that too is carried. Agenda item number 12 is Polling District and Polling Places Review 2023. Leader, over to you.
Many thanks, Madam Mayor. I do have a seconder for this.
Happy to second.
I think at this point, with your indulgence, Madam Mayor, it'd be appropriate to bring in Councillor Annie MacLeod, who's registered to speak and has got an amendment from the Standards Committee, I believe, for this.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to comment on this on behalf of the Standards and General Purposes Committee. The council is required to do a review of polling places every 5 years, and this is a particularly appropriate time for Shelley Gibb and the electoral services manager and the team to carry out what was a very comprehensive review, which included a public consultation. The advice that they give involved changes to 3 polling places. First in Godalming in Holloway polling district, secondly in Farncombe, and thirdly in Farnham Northwest. In Farnham Northwest, they left it to the Standards Committee to look at two options, which was the Hale Village Hall Institute and Foley Hill Infant School. And taking into account the comments from the public consultation and also the comments from the local members, Councillor Beeman came along to the meeting to speak on behalf of local members. The committee are recommending the Hale Village Institute Hall as the appropriate outcome. The second thing to say is that the team had to look at temporary polling places for 3 wards because they won't be available next year when there'll be 2 likely elections, the first being the police commissioner election in May, and the second one being a general election at some undetermined time next year, although it could theoretically go through to January 25. But I very much doubt that the government will want to run an election campaign over next Christmas. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have a general election next year. But the 3 temporary places are listed on the document in front of you in Cranley East, Godalming Binscombe and Godalming Charterhouse. And the only discussion that was held that was of any consequence in that was in terms of Godalming Charterhouse, there seemed to be problems in relation to parking arrangements. And the electoral services team is going to look into that. So if I could pass back to you, Madam Mayor, now to put the recommendations to the council.
Through you, Madam Mayor, could we just clarify whether Councillor MacLeod is proposing an amendment to the recommendation that's been published?
Thank you. Item C is the proposed amendment.
So you are proposing
I'm proposing
the proposed
that.
amendment?
Yes, I am.
And do you
indeed.
have a seconder?
Now, it's normally Councillor Rubini. I'm not sure. Who the Vice Chair who
Councillor Rubini, you're seconding the proposed amendment?
Thank you, Councillor Rubini.
Yes. So do we have any speakers on the proposed and seconded amendment? Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to say that, I mean, I attended this debate partly because I was concerned regarding the Godalming Charterhouse and Godalming Farncombe and Catchall arrangements. Strangely, had the Reverend Ratu still been here, he probably could have given a more direct insight into the parking situation at that particular church than almost anybody else could do. I think myself and I imagine you as one of the ward members yourself, Madam Mayor, and Councillor Crowe as the other ward member will very much acknowledge that the parking situation at that particular church is constrained at the best of times. If we were adding at least another 1, if perhaps 2 wards, even temporarily, to use that polling station at the same time, I think we would be in some issues. And so I very much support that this be contingent upon a suitable parking arrangement being sought. And my suggestions would be in practice, either with the co-op or indeed with Waverley's own car park over the other side of Farncombe Station. I very much support these amendments and thank the Standards Committee for a very sensible debate on the subject.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. Councillor Williams.
As a ward councillor for Binscombe and Charterhouse, this is not an easy kind of situation because there is a real dearth of suitable places for polling stations in the Charterhouse bit of the Binscombe and Charterhouse ward, and I think it is regrettable that we have to look to a polling station that is actually outside the ward and therefore a long distance to travel for some particular residents. Therefore, I particularly welcome the amendment which has been agreed in relation to the proviso that there should be suitable parking arrangements in order to kind of mitigate that problem. But of course, it is also regrettable, therefore, that there will be a number of residents who will find it difficult to be able to access on foot residents without a vehicle to having to access on foot the polling station in any future election. I would love to think that there was some easy answer to that question, but I'm very pleased to say that we've sought to mitigate that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, and then Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you. Yes, too, I am concerned about the Charterhouse situation. I note that it's a temporary thing, and on page 10, it's quite clear that the Armoury building at Charterhouse School, it says here, is unavailable for the whole of 2024. It may be that during the course of 2024, it may have finished its refurbishment or whatever they're doing, so that although the PCC election, Madam Mayor, will perhaps need to be changed, perhaps by the time of the general election, that can come back to that. I don't know whether there is an opportunity to put that in, or whether that's able to be thought about. Maybe Mr. Follows will mention that in a moment. The other point that I'd like to make is a concern regarding Holloway. I regret that I'm rather late to coming to this point, but I have been in dialogue with officers concerning that. I have a significant concern with the intention that that Busbridge Church should be the polling station. It presents us a similar set of problems to the problems at Farncombe, that it is very constrained. The on-street parking is really very difficult. It's at a busy junction. The main access to the church is up a single upper cul-de-sac. So people going into the road will then have to turn around and come back if they're driving. And then it's a busy junction where it gets confused with the Brighton Road and with the drive. And at the beginning and end of school days, there are 3 schools located very close there: Busbridge Junior School, Busbridge Infant School in the same road as the church, and St Edmunds, all within 100 meters or so of this polling station. I think there is a recipe for some disaster there. So I would like to be able to say that after the PCC elections, perhaps there will be an opportunity to rethink that, and that perhaps we could look at other places. I have suggested the Masonic Centre, for instance, which is just outside the Holloway ward, but only by the distance, by a single road width. And I would certainly like that to be investigated. And there is parking there. It's a difficult junction, but in my view, that would be a more sensible proposal than the church. So we've got to get on with this, and I understand we need to vote this in tonight, but I would like to register those 2 concerns, one on Charterhouse, which I think is being aired quite fully, but also my concern on the Holloway ward. It is one ward, a very large ward with nearly 4,000 voters, and there's one polling station. And if that is heavily constrained, I think we might have considerable difficulties. Thank you.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to ask a question and a comment. It concerns the extra paragraph C. I presume that what we intend by C is that any polling station, not just the temporary ones, can be looked at. Because I too was hoping that after the PCC elections in May, that we would actually review whether some of these polling stations worked or not. Having been chairman of governors of Busbridge Infant School, admittedly many moons ago, but even then, the chaos that occurs in that cul-de-sac, which is the only access to the church for voting, you wouldn't park your car on the Brighton Road to do so. And of course, across the road, you're going to have the polling station for Busbridge, which was there, but perhaps, you know, that could be thought of as well as the Masonic Hall. But I have serious worries as to the traffic chaos and the danger to children if we do use that cul-de-sac for parking for going to the polling station. And I think we seriously need to look at whether that is going to work in practice. It is right on the very edge. I mean, the Masonic Hall, Councillor Martin made clear, was one road width away. Well, it's only about one road width and a little bit more from the edge of Holloway. And having been a councillor for Holloway going back years, I know the patch well, so I think we should be seriously thinking whether the change in Holloway from the sports pavilion to the church is a good thing. And perhaps we can see what happens in the PCC elections and then review it. And I would ask for an assurance that officers will review, or the council will review it, because it would be a shame to just carry on blindly if problems do occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beeman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say how pleased I am that the recommendation, the polling station for Farn North West 2 will be moved from Folly Lane School to Hale Village Institute Hall. Although the Institute Hall is outside the ward, it has much more advantage than Folly Lane School in the sense it's actually got easy access, whereas Folly Lane School has a very steep climb. It has better car parking facilities, but perhaps more pertinently, is that it will mean that parents of young children of 5 to 7 will not have to make alternative arrangements for people attending school. And I think that's a victory for common sense, quite frankly. So thank you very much. I hope that will get voted through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to address a couple of questions that have been raised from the floor. The specific amendment, which is Part C, delegates the returning officer to be able to address some of these concerns on the fly effectively over the course of the year. Certainly I and others expressed a hope that some of these more useful facilities would come back into the fore midway through the year or in time for the general election. The turnout is usually fairly low for a police and crime commissioner election. And I don't think a lot of the worries exactly. A lot of the worries that I think many of us might have for a general probably wouldn't manifest themselves for a police and crime commissioner election, but this allows the returning officer to make those amendments in consultation with ward members. Just on the other point about issues at other stations, it's my understanding that Shaylee and the electoral services team do fairly continuously review these, but I think it would have to go through the standards committee. So I'd have to confirm with both the mayor and the monitoring officer, but my understanding would be that would be a discussion with the head of electoral services to kick off that process for discussion through the standards committee. But that would to me feel like the most appropriate place to do that in a proper way.
Thank you. We have three other speakers. Councillor White first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to put on record my total agreement with my co-councillor, Councillor David Beeman for Farnham North West. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the public consultation because I was out of the country at the time. But I am in full support and agreement with the move to Hale community. Thank you. Hale
Thank
Village.
you. We have Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Hyman. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a ward councillor for Binscombe and Charterhouse, I agree with the points already made. I would also add that at every election, we attempt to draw the attention of voters to the possibility of postal voting. And we're all aware that regardless of party, voters who have signed up for postal votes are in fact more likely to vote. So given the difficulties which are particularly evident at these polling stations, but also often occur across the constituency, I think we might make particular efforts to remind our residents that there is an easier option.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make sure that we do consider all the things which might occur, all the situations we might find ourselves in. I would agree that using Folly Hill School for Upper Hale would be silly, but of course only during school term. I know there are a number of members in here, myself included, Councillor Beeman and Councillor Ward, I think, who were actually elected by elections during the summer holidays. And so it would have made much more sense to, it would make much more sense to be able to use schools, which of course most of the time we don't want to. We don't want them to close on a Thursday during the term time, but there is absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be used. And elections do come up during other times. The general election might be next summer, for instance. So I don't think we should be ruling out using things which would help and increase voter turnout, which in Upper Hale, certainly you will have a lower voter turnout if you use only the Institute, where you could be using Institute and Hale School. And on the issue of car parking, where we only had one polling station in my ward of Firgrove in Farnham last time round, instead of two, where we normally had. I expected there to be a problem with car parking. There was a little problem with car parking, but the problem actually was that all of the staff who were at the polling station filled up the small car park at Brambleton Hall, and so there wasn't any car parking off road available. Fortunately, the turnout for that sort of election wasn't massive, and it didn't actually cause a problem that I'd envisaged it might do. But for a general election, certainly there could be. So, you know, it would make more sense in some places, rather than worry about the car parking, to make sure the staff don't fill up the car park themselves and actually think about the customers who are the voters. And that way we can make sure that we don't really have the problem. So just two issues that you know, don't directly relate necessarily to this. I just want to make sure that we're not ruling out things which are beneficial, like using schools if it's not during the term time. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. Councillor MacLeod, would you like to sum up before we move to the vote?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just to thank the officers, Shayla and her team for the good work they've done on all of this, and thank you for members for a good discussion. And I'm pleased that you're broadly going along with the recommendations of the officers and of the Standards Committee. So I would, that's all I need to say in summing up. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So now we come to the vote on the proposed and seconded amendment. Please vote now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Once again, 46 in favour, none against and no abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. So that too is carried. And we come to agenda item number 13, the housing revenue account, new build housing delivery. Leader, over to you again.
Good evening, everyone, again. So on item 13, and indeed some of the subsequent items now relate to new build housing. I'm pleased to propose this, but I will hand over to Councillor Palmer for the detail.
Thank you very much. Item 13 deals with the Elstead and Oxford Ridge additions and will result in a net gain of 24 homes. The design of the schemes reflects the council's priority for increasing the supply of genuinely affordable housing, and is in continuation with the proposals previously approved by the council. I hope that they will have broad support across the council as we seek to continue to meet the challenges that the council faces in providing sufficient housing that people can actually afford to live in.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As one of the members for Godalming Central and Oxford Ward, this investment in homes with genuinely affordable rents, delivering part of our manifesto commitment to social housing, is fantastic news. I'm also particularly pleased to see the detailed commitments on page 281 of the agenda, which outline the climate change and sustainability measures that will be employed to help us meet our target of net zero carbon emissions by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have significant concerns regarding the methodology used by Waverley Housing Department in the analysis that supports the recommendation to the Executive and Council regarding capital approval for housing. This particularly concerns the methodology used in evaluating the valuation of housing property that will actually be let or sold as shared ownership at a discount to open market values. My main concern is that the methodology is not in line with the methodology recommended by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, to which your consultants belong. I have further concerns that the existing value of sites to be demolished isn't taken into consideration at all in Waverley Housing Department assessments. Following a discussion at the ONS Resources meeting on the 14th of November, I have commenced meetings with officers to provide the substance of my concerns. I will bring back progress on this issue to the ONS committee at some future point and then more widely. I would just like to add that I am the managing director of a property company, which is involved in both homes for the open market and the managing director of one of 30 for-profit registered providers in the country delivering affordable housing. So I speak with professional knowledge of this subject. I am supported in this view by Councillor Jane Austen, who also has direct professional knowledge as a lapsed member of the RICS. In the meantime, I will abstain on all the recommendations on capital for housing as presented tonight in this council. I would just like to add that my motivation is cross-political and driven by a burning desire to gain the best value for money for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to comment on Councillor Austin's remarks. We have, Atkins, I beg your pardon, Laurie, I beg your pardon. I have every respect for her qualifications and her skills. But as I said at the very first training session I gave here as a chartered accountant with decades of experience in the private sector around the world, one of the first things I had to do when I entered this council was learn how the council does things. And in this particular case, I think we reassured the ONS committee, and a briefing paper will be coming forward, that we have to abide by a regulatory framework, a financial framework that is alien to the private sector, not only in how things are calculated, but also that measures value in non-monetary terms. So while in her experience as a managing director of a private sector company, her objective is to pursue monetary profit for the benefit of the shareholders, our role as a council is to deliver social value in line with our corporate priorities for our residents. The two things are measured completely differently and can sometimes lead to different outcomes, long-term rather than short-term. And we are obliged to follow the regulatory framework that prescribes how we go about things, whether we like it or not. And I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the things that we have to do, but I respect them. I'm trying to change some of them, but until they change, we will have to do it the way we're told to do it.
Councillor Merriweather, shall I take the other speakers? Councillor Hyman.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yes, unfortunately, Councillor Atkins is right. I also attended that meeting, and I identified that there was a failure to consider the existing current value of the land and the buildings that were there. There are 10 bungalows which are intended to be knocked down, and the value of those, of course, is millions of pounds, and it hadn't been considered. So when you're being told here that this is the viability in respect of this, and I don't want to go into exempt, you're not actually being told the whole story. There's £1 million awry. I do not accept. I do not in any way imagine that this council is going to listen to me or Councillor Atkins or anybody else in the majority. So I would refer you to In 2 meetings' time, that will be the Hewitt bequest in about half or 3/4 of an hour's time, hopefully. You will see on page 17 of your papers there, if you actually received any, I didn't, but you can see it online in the Hewitt bequest meeting. You'll see that it says under measurement that assets are initially measured at cost comprising expenditure that's directly attributable to bringing the asset into working condition. This is open, this is not in exempt. It says assets are then carried in the balance sheet using the following measurement basis: land and buildings, fair value, determined using the basis of existing use value for social housing. Assets including the balance sheet at current value are revalued where there have been material changes. So, you know, we do have to account for these at the existing use, and you're being told that when we're doing things properly for the trust here. That's what we're doing. We're not using some sort of upside down method that doesn't apply here because this is special. We don't have to actually, you know, I mean, we cannot have an attitude of money, no object. We're just going to spend as much as we want. That's the way to go bust, which lots of councils are doing, and I don't think we should be doing that. My concern, particularly in respect of this, is that we have having covered that, there are other issues with this site, particularly, which is flooding, which is mentioned in here in the papers. It says that there is an issue with flooding. It's in the name, Springfield. There's lots of springs there. There's a massive problem with it at the moment. This must go to consultation with the residents before we go forward and start spending any money on it. We need to look at the finances properly, but it does tell us in these papers, on page 292 of your papers, if you turn to that, you'll see that on page 292, well, firstly, actually, there's a table there, breakdown of scheme costs, so that's halfway down, and you'll see in there it doesn't tell you give any value for the properties as they are at the moment. It's missing any sort of figure of, well, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million pounds for the 10 existing properties. It's not there. It's been ignored. So we're way out on our calculations. Look down the next line, gross development value. It says, and this is pink, so I'm not going to read out any numbers. The gross development value is based on open market valuations, and we shouldn't be only doing so. We should be covering it both ways. May I?
Through you, Madam Mayor, can I just check that councillors are aware that page 292, I think, is on pink papers. And if you did want to discuss that, Councillor Hyman, you would need to propose a motion that the council goes into exempt session. I
am avoiding, very carefully avoiding saying it, and I've just said that I'm not going to. So I really don't think there's any necessity to interrupt me, but I always am interrupted when I'm right. If you don't mind, if I may continue, that we do have also on that, you'll see at the top of that page, the end of the first sentence, regular winter flooding. It can't be exempt. It's not secret. We do have, and if I can just refer to which page it is, 291, the previous page. It does tell us in there, third paragraph at the bottom, a further meeting will be held before a public consultation. That's not secret. We're going to public consultation. Unfortunately, we've got to...
Councillor Beaman, you have exceeded your 4
I'm
minutes.
not Councillor Beaman.
I beg your pardon, Councillor Hyman. You have exceeded your 4 minutes, so I'm going to stop you there and take other speakers.
In that case, I'm sorry, the clock wasn't counting down on me. How was I to know that? I wish to make an addition amendment to propose an amendment, if I may.
I think
Very
I'll take
briefly.
other speakers, and we'll resolve that up here first. So we have Councillor Austin first, and then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I look forward to receiving the briefing paper on this matter, which I understand was ready a week ago. So I'm surprised we've not yet seen it. I am trained as a qualified chartered surveyor, and I've spent a significant part of my professional training undertaking Red Book valuations. I do fully endorse and reiterate Councillor Atkins on concerns in this matter. What I would like to see is a standard methodology applied in assessing viability of these projects. I endorse standardisation in accordance with RICS principles. I'd just like to reiterate that Elmbridge Borough Council take into consideration existing land value and adjust the value to consider the discount attributed to affordable housing. The previous head of planning at Epsom and current at Harrow has confirmed the omission of existing land value would be unusual. I would also just say that RICS standard valuation would be the on exit defined open market value. You would discount for affordable and social housing something in the order of 70%. This has not been happening in Waverley. All of this comes from Lauren, from Councillor Atkins and from me, from a place of wanting to deliver more for Waverley. If we can use the same amount of money and deliver more housing, we should be doing that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Long and then back to Councillor Beaman, to Councillor Hyman. And if you can make your amendment very brief.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I would like to speak on this as the ward councillor for Elstead. And I'd like to agree with what Councillor Merriweather has said about the value of this proposed development being in more than monetary terms. Demolishing the existing bungalows at Springfield will enable better use of the space, permitting additional homes to be built on that site. These are numbers which Waverley badly needs at a stage where every unit counts in the 5-year housing target. And every unit counts for Elstead too. In our neighbourhood plan, we've allocated the Springfield site on the basis that it will yield 26 of the 160 homes that we need to provide by 2032. And in a village of around 1,000 homes existing, providing a net gain of 16 homes without losing a greenfield site is an opportunity we can't afford to pass up. Beyond this, demolishing a row of 10 inefficient 1960s bungalows and replacing them with energy efficient homes and new homes is the right thing to do. To address Councillor Hyman's concerns about the flooding, I've attended meetings with Officer Louisa Blundell and the Elstead Parish Council, and I'm, as an Elstead resident, I'm very well aware of the flooding issues in that area, very comfortable that flood mitigation has been considered. And also to address Councillor Hyman's concern about the support of the residents. I can assure him that having sat through many meetings on the neighbourhood plan with Elstead residents, and also that they've been consulted in the past, that the Springfield site has huge support within Elstead amongst the residents. Just finally, I'd like to raise the fact that there's a very human cost to the proposed demolition of these current 10 bungalows. There are residents living in them at the moment who are currently in limbo, who are waiting to hear that they are going to have new efficient homes. And I'd urge on their behalf that we proceed and approve this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. Well, very briefly, I'm not sure whether those residents who are in support know that the social housing that's being removed, which is currently houses and bungalows, it will be
Councillor
replaced by
Hyman,
flats.
You're moving to your amendment, please.
Yes, my concern is that we are told, as I said, that there is going to be consultation on this, and my concern is that it is not among the recommendations, and I want to ensure that it is. So I'm proposing that we add a recommendation to page 273, which would be number 8, which would be very simple, that the council instructs officers to carry out a fully informed public consultation prior to submission of any planning applications. I don't think anybody could object to that. It's just that we do what we're going to say we're going to do, because it's not covered in the recommendation. So either we're pretending we're going to consult properly and let people know what's really involved in what's being put in front of them.
Through you, Madam Mayor, could I ask Councillor Hyman just to repeat just the wording of the proposed amendment, please? Slowly, if possible, so that officers could just make a note of it.
That the council instructs officers to carry out a fully informed public consultation prior to submission of any planning application. And if you want to put it up on the screen, you're more than welcome to. You second me on that?
Yeah.
So they can't get out of the to see whether people are going to.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the proposed amendment is that an additional recommendation is made that the council instructs officers to carry out a fully informed public consultation prior to submission of any planning application. My understanding, Madam Mayor, is that there are two recommendations that have been moved by Councillor Follows and seconded by Councillor Palmer. One is in respect of this site and the other is in respect of the Oxford Ridge site. Can I just check that Councillor Hyman is only proposing this amendment and the other two recommendations before council remain the same, please?
Thank you. There is consultation, more so at Oxford Ridge, and there has been years of it. That's why I only spoke to page 273, as I said. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there a seconder for that proposed amendment? There is. Does anybody want to debate that amendment? Yeah, Councillor Follows.
Madam Mayor, thank you, members. I don't believe this amendment is necessary for a couple of reasons. The first is actually the reason that Councillor Hyman outlined for Oxford Ridge, which is also the same for Elsted. Having just spoken to the member for Elsted, there has been consultation with residents on Springfield, just as there has been for Oxford Ridge site E and F. I know, for example, on Oxford Ridge site E and F, it has because I've been to every single one of them as the ward member myself. In terms of further consultation beyond what has already been done, I personally don't see any further need, and I actually just also want to reiterate Councillor Long's comments that those residents probably want to get moving on at this point, but also just to suggest that when planning applications actually come forward, that in itself has a consultative element that those residents can engage in, and so both parts of the motion, I think, of the amendment, I think, are fundamentally unnecessary, and therefore I oppose it.
Thank you, Councillor Long.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to add to that, that any further delay, so we have already experienced extensive delay in the Elsted neighbourhood plan and bringing that forward. We very recently had a hearing on that matter in which Waverley assured the examiner that the development at Springfield could be delivered within the next 3 years, and that was one of the criteria on which it was accepted. I know that my residents would be very distressed if that's delayed any further, and that they would see an opportunity to be consulted as something that they would, I'm sure, wish to pass up.
Thank you. So are there any other speakers? Councillor Hyman, you have an opportunity to sum up. Oh, beg your pardon?
I think I have an opportunity to speak to the motion first, but I was passed by on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I just wanted to reiterate that I sat through the examination of the Elsted neighbourhood plan. It was very well supported by the community. It's been through referendum. It's been advertised to the whole of the village. Everybody is aware of the sites within that and have had ample opportunity to look at that. Within the planning process itself, as Councillor Follows has said, if anyone needs to be fully informed, they have to know all the full planning documents, the flood risk assessment, the ecology assessments, every single thing. You can only be fully informed once those documents are available on the portal, and then anyone can comment on those. And I'm sure that if individual residents have concerns, that they can either speak to the planning service here or equally speak to the local ward councillor on the matter. I do not see any further need to delay things with a spurious consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman, over to you to sum up.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I think I have the 6 minutes from the beginning and 4 minutes from the end if I wish to, by rights, but I won't need that, anything like that. We all know that when we go to a planning application, Regulation 3 application comes forward. It is where the council is asking for planning permission on its own development. That's going to go straight through the planning committee and be granted. The chance of any ever being refused is virtually nothing. So the only genuine consultation that we're likely to get for residents is going to be in this at this stage before we get to the planning stage. What the residents say, any people who genuinely object and have very good reasons, which we don't know about at the moment, very possibly, Any residents who bring forward good reasons, like for instance that the council refused grounds to an adjacent development, refused an adjacent development of social housing on Habitat's grounds, and the council obeyed the law on that occasion, and you can read that for yourself. It's there, obviously in the history recently, a couple of years ago. There are very good reasons why we should carry out this consultation, and that is that actually, if we don't, this is just a lie on page 291. I don't like to use that word, but it says here that the concept designs have been shared with the parish council and received their support in principle. I don't think that can be secret. A further meeting will be held before a public consultation. That shouldn't be secret. Right? So we're being told here that that's what's going to happen, and now everybody's arguing and saying, oh no, I'm wrong. That actually, we were telling Porkies there, we're not going to have a further public consultation. We don't need it. Let's plough ahead, because I'm telling you, all the residents are happy and nothing's going to come up at all. With the benefit of the knowledge that we've got here, nothing's going to come up that can stop this going forward. Really, I mean, you're just arguing to not speak, to not do what you're saying here in the papers. Okay, if you want to vote against my recommendation, show yourselves to be dishonest. Show everyone at Christmas what you like, because it says here we're going to consult, and you're voting not to consult if you avoid it.
Councillor Hyman, 1 moment.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a reminder to all councillors about their duty to uphold high standards of conduct and ethics in the council chamber. While robust political debate is obviously acceptable, breaching the code of conduct is not, and I would just urge councillors just to bear their obligations in mind. Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. And if you look up there, honesty holds of public offices should be truthful. And what we're doing here is saying we're not being truthful. So let's go to the vote, and let's just record it if we can, please, and see how many people want us to carry out this uninformed consultation with residents to make sure before we go to a planning application that we're doing the right thing, and how many people think, no, we're not going to ask the public, we're just going to believe what people are saying. We know what the public want, let's not ask them, let's not do what we're saying in the papers. Thank you.
Thank you indeed.
There's any excuse to be dishonest.
Are you raising a point of order? No. Yes, so we now go to the vote on the proposed and seconded amendment. So please vote showing.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the proposed amendment is the 2 recommendations that are printed in the papers, with the addition of a further recommendation that says that the council instructs officers to carry out a fully informed public consultation prior to submission of any planning application.
Yeah,
Madam Chair, this is to take a vote on the proposed amendment, which is now 3 recommendations before council.
Yeah. Yeah.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, surely we're voting on the amendment to change what we're voting on in substance.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is 1 additional recommendation that has been proposed as an amendment, and it's whether you want to change your existing 2 recommendations to be 3.
We're voting on the amendment to change. Yes.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, if I could interject for just
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I've had my hand up for about 3 minutes.
Yes, I know. Did you have a point of order?
It is a point of order in that I just have no idea how I'm going to vote on what's just been proposed, because it seems confused to me. If this proposal with the amendment is rejected, do we go back to the original proposal? Thank you.
So are there 3 amendments that we're voting on?
No, through you, Madam Mayor, the amendment is to add an additional recommendation to the council. There are 2 existing and the proposed amendment is to add a 3rd one. And we are to take a vote on that proposal to add a 3rd recommendation. If that vote fails, we will go back to the substantive motion that was moved by Councillor Follows and seconded by Councillor Palmer, which is the 2 recommendations printed on your papers.
Thank you. So that is clear. So please vote now whether or not you agree the amended proposal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 4 in favour, 3 abstentions and 39 against.
So the amendment falls and we go back to the original proposals. Councillor Follows.
Can I just confirm, Madam Mayor, my intention to sum up unless there are any other speakers?
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Your indulgence. On the order paper, we do have the statement that Councillor Hyman identified in that a further meeting will be held before a public consultation. Are we expecting to have a public consultation? Because if we aren't, I think the amendment should be that should be removed from the order paper. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is an opportunity for debate rather than questions. I'm not clear whether Councillor Reid is proposing a further amendment or if he's simply debating.
Point of personal explanation, Madam Mayor, as I believe I can assist with this. My understanding is that as part of the process that the housing team usually adopt for social housing, that they do conduct meetings with residents as a form of limited consultation process with those residents. And what that usually means is they take informal plans at a point earlier in the cycle, which is what they've done in both Oxford Ridge and in Elstead. I've been present for the ones in Oxford Ridge, and I know Councillor Long has been present in Elstead. As they go through that cycle and have more firm plans, they usually repeat those consultation events. The one in Oxford Ridge is usually at St Mark's Church. My understanding of the report is that it is referring to those type of consultation events as part of the process that exists before a planning application is submitted. So under that interpretation, I do not believe that we need to amend the motion because I believe they will fulfil the objectives as stated in the paper. I admit in future it might be clearer for that to be stated more holistically, but that is definitely what I've experienced of the housing team in every single one of these sorts of things over the last 6 years as a councillor.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I wonder if I could just return, Madam Mayor, to the contribution from Councillor Atkins and Councillor Austin earlier. I welcome 2 new members to this council using their professional expertise and experience to suggest changes that Waverley perhaps might make. I'm going to be supporting the proposal to go ahead with the projects here, despite the fact that they are challenging that. But I'm urging them to work through officers and to resolve their issues, problems. And until that is done, I'm happy to support the proposals that we have before us tonight. But I do welcome their contribution, bringing their professional experience to bear, including running housing associations and social housing projects. So they're not unaware of the issues for social housing that Waverley experience. And I think that that's an important thing and we should welcome their contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. So are there any other speakers? Councillor Follows, did you actually want to do your summing up?
If I may just sum up, first of all, I do welcome professional expertise. I mean, there actually is a great deal of professional expertise on both sides of this chamber, particularly since the elections. I think we're actually we've got a lot of very professional, very experienced people, not just in council work, but in professional work outside of this place. There is also, of course, an immense amount of professional advice and expertise from our officers, as evident in the advice that they give. And I think we just need to be clear that these are houses for the HRA. We're not intending to sell them. So their ultimate value is a little less relevant in that sort of picture. But of course, I actually support the points that Councillor Martin made. There is a process through ONS, which I genuinely do hope that those two members go through so that those issues can be dealt with properly and transparently and in the public domain. And I do hope that members of the executive and other members will engage with those issues so that we can all understand what is a pretty complicated sort of set of things to get your head round, even if you've got professional expertise. It's something that I'd be keen to listen to as well. Just in reflecting what we're actually doing here, tomorrow is strangely my 6th anniversary as a councillor, and in almost Star Wars style, Waverley started Site D of Oxford Ridge just as I was getting elected, before moving on to Site A and B in a slightly strange order. Site C now in progress. So I'm thrilled to see Site F, because it was something that I went to a consultation in, I feels it back in the mists of time, must be 4 or 5 years ago at this point, when it was a vague expression on a map somewhere. And we do exist in a representative democracy at the end of the day. So when you have got the views of ward members such as Councillor Long in Elstead and myself in the Central and Oxford, along with Victoria since the election, those I do think should carry some weight also, particularly if we have attended those consultations. So it's my hope that everybody can respect everybody else's experience, everybody can be reasonable with our officers and not get aggressive with them, and that actually the experience of ward members is also valuable. But going back to the recommendations, I cannot support this enough. We need to crack on with it in Elstead, and Site F will be great. So let's go.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. Did you want to raise a point of order of any kind?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I make a point of order, please?
What is your point of order?
Just that in point 2.1.3, it says approve the sale of
But wait a
shared
minute, what is
ownership.
your point of order?
That what the councillor said was not correct.
So what point of order, what standing order is that?
I don't know.
That's not a point of order. Thank you. We go back
There we
to,
go.
therefore, the recommendations which are in front of us. I'll read them. There are 2 votes. One is, with regard to Springfield Elstead, the executive recommends to council the approval of a project budget allocation of £10,074,928, with the delegation to executive to approve the final budget once tender returns for the construction contract have been received. Vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 39 in favour, 6 abstentions and 1 against.
Is carried. The second part of that is with regard to Oxford Ridge Site F. The executive recommends to council the approval of a Site F project budget allocation of £7,270,379, with the delegation to executive to approve the final budget once tender returns for the construction contract have been received, and the approval of an additional and specific budget of £150,000 to facilitate the design of Site E, Oxford Ridge, by the appointed contractor for Site F. Please vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That is 41 in favour, 5 abstentions and none against.
So that is carried. Thank you. We come to agenda item number 14, the new build housing delivery in Whitley. Leader.
Many
please
thanks.
introduce.
I won't go into too much depth with this one before handing over to the seconder, Councillor Palmer, but a very similar approach, I think.
Yes, thank you. As Councillor Follows says, this is following the similar council's strategy of prioritising affordable housing. Slightly different in this case with Whitley. We already have 3 council-owned properties next to the 3 that are being considered, and it's there is a potential of economies of administration in addition to the overall prioritisation of affordable housing. The details are in exempt, but I hope the council will agree with the proposal, which continues our overall prioritisation.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? No speakers. So Councillor Follows, do you want to sum up at all?
Nothing else to say, Madam Mayor, and pleased to move the recommendation.
Okay, I'll read the recommendation. It is that the executive recommends to council the approval of the allocation of a project budget of £818,000 and £253 to be met through a combination of capital receipts and borrowing. Please vote.
Has everybody voted? Oh, Councillor Atkins. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That is 41 in favour, 5 abstentions and none against.
So that is carried. We come to agenda item number 15, the housing revenue account, 12 new homes at Woodside Park, Cashel Lane. Leader, please introduce and move the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Again, a variation on a theme, and I'm sure anybody who's familiar with the Woodside Park development will be glad to see these sorts of properties in that development, as well as the market properties. At that point, I will hand over to Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I'm happy to second this. Here we're talking about the addition of 12 new homes. This has in fact already been approved by council. What we're looking at here is updating our current understanding of both costs and value. The scheme remains viable and I hope council will approve it.
Thank you. Are there any speakers? I don't see any speakers, so I'll read the recommendation. The executive recommends to council the approval of the allocation of an additional £276,342 budget to be met through a combination of capital receipts and borrowing. Please vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We only have 45 votes as Councillor Clark has left the room. So we have 43 in favour, 2 abstentions and none against.
Thank you very much. So that too is carried. We now come to agenda item number 16, which is motions. One motion has been submitted. And Leader, Councillor Keel, you're going to propose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe there is an amendment to consider before I commence my introduction.
Madam Mayor, I have an amendment which I've submitted to Democratic Services and supplied to all members this evening. It is my hope that this can be adopted as part of the substantive motion before we have the debate. The amendment, which was seconded, I gather, by Councillor Crowe, will implement the outcomes of the State of the Borough meeting that was held last Friday. It is, I hope, straightforward and meets all the objectives from that meeting. And it's my request that this be adopted by the proposer of the motion.
Councillor Follows. Councillor Crowe, would you confirm your seconding?
Yes, the motion.
Thank you very much. And is it the consent of the meeting that we include this? Thank you.
Sorry, can we put it up so we see what it is? Well, if we're going to agree to it here, can we put it up on the board, please, so we can see what it is, just so that we know?
Yes. Councillor Hyman, all we've done so far is to agree the amendment. We then will go back to the motion to be proposed by Councillor Keel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very supportive of the amendment from Councillor Follows and Councillor Crowe. I feel this strengthens the motion by adding context from the State of the Borough debate and some of the themes that were discussed there. So I accept that, and I'm pleased that we're discussing the amended motion as a whole. With your permission, I'd like to move the motion, which deals with issues regarding the disruption to water supply in Waverley and Guildford in early November. I believe I have a second.
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. As you'll see from the agenda, the motion seeks in the main to formally record the disruption to the water supply across a significant part of Waverley, which started on Saturday, the 4th of November. It is asking that the council acknowledge the tremendous efforts of the local community in supporting our most vulnerable residents. It raises concerns about raw sewage discharge into areas within Waverley and discusses the poor communications from Thames Water during the incident and the chronic underinvestment in water infrastructure. It asks the leader to write to Thames Water to seek a detailed report on what happened in November and the ongoing instances of raw sewage discharges and assurances around compensation and future communications. This motion is improved by the amendment concerning the detail from the State of the Borough debate. I think that the suggestion of looking at our own emergency resilience plans is excellent, and the additional detail from the debate to include in the letter is necessary. In particular, concern around the financial situation of Thames Water was raised, and just today, Thames Water has admitted to MPs on the Environment Committee in Parliament that it is facing a seminal moment and does not have enough money to pay off a £190 million loan due in April next year, with a warning that if nationalised, taxpayers would be facing a large bill. The alternative apparently is Ofwat agreeing to household bills increasing by an eye-watering 40% on top of inflation by 2030. Many of us will be aware of the recent water disruption in Godalming, Bramley and other surrounding areas, and I, as a local ward councillor for Central and Oxford, saw that the impact on residents and services was massive, with 13,000 people left initially without water by the Sunday morning, with that number quickly escalating. The requests made by us for additional water stations in affected areas such as Milford were not granted, and the lack of alternative provision of the water stations meant that there was gridlock in the town centre. Schools and nurseries had to close on the Monday, leaving children without education and causing childcare issues for many families. The communications from Thames Water was limited and unhelpful. The website was periodically updated, but with very little detail. As local councillors, we shared what information we could, with many residents telling us this was the main way they found out what was going on. There was nothing posted on Thames Water's Facebook channel, where a lot of the community discussions were taking place, very little on X. Looking back on the disruption, it would have been helpful for some public information on practical things like not draining your hot water tank, for example. Compensation should be paid to residents for every 12 hours without service, but we have heard from some they've not received what they expected or anything at all. Clarity on this from Thames Water is crucial, and not least for businesses who had to close or modify their trading due to the outage. These issues and the impact on residents were discussed at the State of the Borough debate on Friday, the 8th of December, and we were delighted with the level of attendance and engagement from the public. I'm very grateful also to the officers, building staff who helped to organise and facilitate this meeting on a Friday evening. And as the leader said earlier, we could not have held it without you. One of the themes I noticed most strongly as a local councillor during this water disruption was around the ability to access alternative supplies of water. Many people contacted their local councillors when they realised that despite being on the priority service register, they had not received any water. We also found that many care homes were without enough water. As well as these issues experienced by those on the priority services register, there were people who couldn't access water stations who would not normally be considered vulnerable. Our geography being what it is, we found that some non-drivers could not have managed to walk up the steep hills carrying enough water for their household. This is where the tremendous efforts of the local community came into play, with local councillors of all parties queuing for water and delivering to those who needed help. Other local organisations stepped up, offering their vehicles and volunteers to do the same, and neighbours and family looked out for one another. I will not begin to name individuals or organisations for fear of missing some out, but this truly was a huge community response. I would also like to put on record my thanks to all the officers at Waverley who worked tirelessly throughout to represent our residents' interests. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I look forward to hearing any comments from other members.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just say this morning, as our roles in Surrey County Councils, Lisa and I put forward a similar motion and we were successful in securing agreement from that council. And I'm very pleased that this is now getting the attention it deserves. Residents across Waverley and in particular Cranley have suffered for far too long with bursting pipes, multiple interruptions in supply and inadequate sewage infrastructure. 25% of Thames drinking water is lost through leaks, some of which remain unfixed for months and sometimes even years. Residents are tired of hearing of excuses when our water fails. It's power supply problems, water turbidity, and recurrent problems with valves. What it feels like is a lack of planning and long-term lack of investment. Councillor Keele has already mentioned that an hour ago, Thames Water have admitted that they don't have enough money to pay off a £190 million loan. It is completely unacceptable that taxpayers should foot this bill whilst this company has been bled dry by design. The government has allowed this to happen on their watch, but yet again, it looks like customers on top of the cost of living crisis will now face soaring water bills. It is a national scandal. As well as appalling leakage levels, we have unsustainable abstraction from our rivers and our aquifers, alongside worsening water quality, whilst government ministers rip up pollution rules. What is clear is that we cannot go on like this. This latest event in Godalming and Guildford is simply another symptom of what has been clear to my residents for some time. You will be aware that last year in the Cranley area, we suffered 3 major outages. The last one coincided with a heat wave. Residents, including the elderly, queued in soaring temperatures for a mere 2 2-litre bottles. Residents on the priority list were overlooked, schools were forced to shut, businesses were shut, and the overall impact on the community was considerable. And as with this case, there wasn't enough water, not enough people, and communication was haphazard and non-existent in some cases. But we all know it's not just about water supply, it is also about sewage. This November, whilst residents in Guildford and Godalming were without water, my residents in Cranley were experiencing raw sewage flowing unchecked into their rivers, onto their roads and into their gardens. The smell was appalling. Residents are now telling me that they are terrified when it rains like it has done today. I therefore fully support this motion and the amendment that has been made, the addition that's been made. We need to take every opportunity to highlight this situation however we can and force Thames Water and the government of the day to take action. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Are there any speakers? Councillor Rubini and then Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can only echo what has been said, but add from the Havesmoor perspective, about 3 or 4 years ago under the droughts, we had a lot of problems with water supply. And in fact, Thames Water did exactly the same. They failed to deliver bottled waters to the vulnerable. They failed in all their communications. It really was a dire state, and yet we were promised that things would improve. I would also say about meetings with them. I've been to 2 or 3 meetings with the Chief Executive Officer, where she made promises, first of all, to upgrade pipes to Havesmoor and to also work with planning committees. But I've seen none of this done. Now, this is a considerable time ago. So they're doing absolutely nothing for the future. The other problem I have in Havesmoor is continual leakage of sewage to highways and private houses. Over the last flood 3 or 4 weeks ago in that heavy rain, I visited 2 houses where in fact the sewage got into them because it had flowed out and come into their basements. And again, going back to about last year with those big floods, I had several houses flooded with sewage, which Thames were unable to get rid of. She had to employ a private tanker to get it out of her basement. That is wrong. They don't seem to have these plans to go ahead. And yet, as you say, they spend millions on perhaps their shareholders and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't echo the very good points that have been made by Councillor Keele, Councillor Townsend, Councillor Rabini, describing the awful situation that we went through and the response the emergency response that Waverley officers and many of us sitting in this chamber. But there are many of us in this council chamber who will remember the day back in 1989 when Conservative Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher sold off the publicly owned water and sewage industry in England and Wales for £7.6 billion. And with no debt at the time. Thatcher promised that it would lead to a new era of investment. It would improve water quality and it would help bring down bills. Privatisation has achieved none of these things. And of course, the long-term answer must be that the water industry is taken back into public ownership. However, at the moment, we are at crisis point and an emergency response is needed. We've heard from Councillor Keele and Councillor Townsend of the financial frailty of Thames Water, and we have in Thames Water a company with a debt pile of £14 billion, major leakages from the system and real concerns in Waverley and beyond about the consistency of our water supply and the pollution of our waterways as a result of agricultural runoff and sewage spills. Many questions were asked last Friday evening in this chamber of Thames Water. Thames Water, who were unfortunately not present. This motion is fundamentally about ensuring that there are proper, documented and evidence-based responses to these questions that we raise about contingency planning for any future interruptions in supply, about the real causes of this serious water outage, which still remain unclear, and about future planning to tackle some of the deep-seated problems of the water industry in our area. And then there's just one other thing. In the words of Elton John, sorry seems to be the hardest word. But one thing that the people of this borough need is a sincere and genuine apology. And although that is not helped by the contemptible absence of a Thames Water representative at our meeting last week, at our State of the Borough meeting, I think an apology is due. And also from our Member of Parliament, Jeremy Hunt, who was invited, but who was also absent from the meeting last Friday. But perhaps we also need an apology from Jeremy Hunt for failing time after time to vote for measures to ensure water companies take responsibility for spilling sewage into our rivers, and his ongoing support for the disaster of the privatisation of the water industry. I think also in that respect, an apology is due. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will support this motion. I attended the meeting last Friday and I have to say I didn't learn anything new. For those wards that were covered by the water outage and the raw sewage overflows, we as ward councillors know full well what occurred and what went wrong and what should be done in their wards to improve things. I hope the meeting coming this Friday, organised by our two MPs, will give us some of the answers. What is important is why did it happen? And how should Thames Water improve the service to customers when outage does occur in future? For example, it is not acceptable for the people of Blackheath, who were affected, and no mention is made of them, to go to Godalming, which takes a good quarter of an hour, if not 20 minutes driving, to collect water, or to have to go to Artington. It would have been a simple solution to have a situation where if a village is affected, then water bottles are delivered to, say, the local village hall where it is administered. So I feel that the people of Blackheath in particular had a raw deal. I have to say too, when I hear that people took the initiative to buy water through the internet, to have it delivered was quite a bright thing, but it cost them money, and that's wrong too. I also take the view that to use Procedure Rule 15.1 was clearly not what those rules were intended for. The clear intention of those rules is to call an annual debate in anticipation of a budget and agreeing policy frameworks. Under paragraph 15.1d Roman 2, I look forward to hearing from the leader with his budget proposals re Thames Water and strategy, and I hope he's not suggesting that this council bail out Thames Water financially. Thanks very much.
Councillor Follows.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to use my time to establish an already clear constitutional principle on the state of the borough. That's not what this motion is about. I, of course, wholeheartedly endorse this motion. As mentioned by Councillor Townsend, this morning I introduced a near identical motion to Surrey County Council, which passed unanimously. Thousands of households were without water for several days, and many also had to endure a frustrating mission accomplished from Thames Water when they were still without water themselves, some for several days. Somewhere close to 13,000 households were impacted, but we also know that it could have been a great deal worse, as we were at one point looking like a third reservoir was likely to be offline, and with it, orders of magnitude more households without water, potentially upwards of 40,000. Now, Councillors Keele and Townsend have explored both the incident and the wider issues, and one of the reasons that my colleagues and I have put these motions to various levels of government is as follows. Now, there is a long history of local authorities and others needing help to get a coherent response from Thames Water. Each layer of local government and government have a role in this process, and there is value in Waverley adding its voice and weight to that. Only with parish, borough, county and our MPs asking the same questions, each level of government representing many different political parties and groups adding their voices together, do we have any hope of getting a coherent answer, not just about the past, but about the future? That's certainly what I'm hearing from residents in Godalming, Milford, Whitley and Bramley, which were the main areas impacted. And that's why ultimately we're here to hear residents and make sure their voices are heard. Now, Thames Water has pledged various infrastructure upgrades and spending, but this needs to be balanced with the fact that they've made those promises in the past before. And the recent external auditors reports and the news today show that the short-term stability, the financial stability of the company is in jeopardy. Now, I will be attending the session hosted by the MPs, and I'm attending in good faith to actually contribute the outcomes of our meeting. I hope that it is an opportunity for everybody really at this point to kick in all the issues that we've heard from the various places and that Thames Water might possibly do something. I'm hoping that that's what we will be doing. But that being said, I am a little bit concerned about it. I mean, the meeting is at 5:15. It's not going to be very easy for a lot of people to get to, and there's no online component. And I have to say, although I won't be making this kind of comment in that meeting, the place where I want our MPs to really do something about Thames Water is not the Medlick building of the University of Surrey. It's the floor of the House of Commons, where frequently at least one of them is not present. On both of them don't tend to actually vote to do anything about regulating Thames Water. And I am sure it won't require me to attend that building on Friday to make that point, because I know for a fact that many, many others will do so in my stead, because this is something that residents have understood at this point, that their MPs talking on a Friday night, Friday afternoon, I should say, to talk about this matter when they've not done anything about it in the House. is frankly reprehensible, and I know people will call them on it. I will go there in good faith and present the outcomes of Waverley's State of the Borough meeting, and I will leave it at that. And I will leave other comments to others who I'm sure will feel incredibly strongly about this matter. On that, Madam Mayor, I again confirm my support for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Austin. Yes. Yes, thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I reiterate on behalf of members, all members of Bramley and Wonersh Ward, our dismay, our anger and our frustration at the ongoing terrible performance of Thames Water, arising from many decades of underinvestment into infrastructure. Here is a flavour of what residents in my ward have had to deal with in the last couple of years. Earlier this year, a substantial sewage leak and an overwhelmed sewage overflow leaked straight into our river at Gosden Common. The overwhelmed pumping station took Thames Water 6 months to fix, and the constant presence of pumping tankers was extremely noisy and disruptive. Thames Water sewage trucks pumping away are sadly a regular feature in Bramley and the villages to the south of me like Alfold. The November water outage affected Bramley and Wonersh residents for the longest, many without water for over 7 days. This major incident especially impacted those without transport and the vulnerable, many of whom did not receive bottled water for days. We repeatedly requested a bottled water station in Bramley, but none was forthcoming. Local businesses lost trade, schools were closed across Waverley. Communication from the water company was simply not good enough. It was intermittent, and in my view, the helplines were woefully understaffed. This latest outage is unfortunately not an isolated incident. 18 months ago, we had a 3-day water outage. No one received the promised compensation under the Customer Guarantee Scheme. Thames Water calculates compensation via a desktop assessment, which produces interesting results, often having little correlation to the length of time no water was actually flowing from the taps. Many have received no automatic credit to their account. For those who have been without water for a week, having to chase for compensation simply adds insult to injury. What we want is a full and unequivocal apology. I look forward to raising this with Thames Water CEO directly at the public meeting arranged by our MP on Friday. This motion also refers to ongoing sewage discharges, something I, like everyone I hope in this room, find completely unacceptable. Last November, I attended a meeting in Bramley our MP, Jeremy Hunt, had arranged with the CEO of Thames Water to tackle sewage overflows. Indeed, one of Jeremy's first actions as Chancellor was to ring-fence water company fines. Although I completely agree with the sentiment of this motion, I feel some of the wording does not serve any purpose. For example, point 2b, sewage overflow data is already a matter of public record and can be easily accessed via Thames Water's own website, or I refer the leader to the excellent Rivers Trust website. Because of this, I know in 2022, the equivalent of 30 days straight sewage went into Cranley Waters in and around Bramley. We no longer let our dog bathe or our children paddle in that river. Hopefully, the leader is also aware that Thames Water investment plans are also a matter of public record. If he's stuck, he can always access them on Jeremy Hunt's website. I hope, also have read the comprehensive response from Thames Water to our MP on the 20th of November, which answers many of his queries. I note today from the leader of Surrey County Council, Tim Oliver, he has been in touch with DEFRA and will be making contact with Ofwat, and therefore point 5 I think is not required. I welcome Waverley Borough Council developing its own resilience plan. I'm proud of what our MP is doing in the House of Commons, and including especially the additional 57 billion of investment that was committed from going into the water companies over the next 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, and then Councillor Busby. I think I've left you out. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I was delighted to watch the Surrey County Council debate this morning, and I thought the points that Councillor Follows made were very good. And I particularly welcome his want for a coherent approach, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. I am in support of this motion and I will be voting for it. I too, like many councillors, was busy delivering water to all sorts of households, vulnerable people, elderly people, people without cars on the Sunday and Monday of the particular problem in our area. So I have a very clear idea of what happened, and I think Thames Water are Thames Water's communications, I agree with everybody that's spoken on this, was simply appalling and absolutely unacceptable. So there is lots to discuss with them, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from them on Friday. I do note the comments of many members regarding the lack of investment in infrastructure and the desire to bring the water companies back into public ownership. And criticism of Thames Water as a public company. As Councillor Townsend said, Madam Mayor, we all know that decisions on major water infrastructure and the structure of the industry take many years and sometimes decades to implement. I would point out that over the last 26 years, we've had 13 years of a Labour government, 5 years of a Conservative and Liberal Democrat government administration, and most recently 8 years of a Conservative administration. During the 13 years of the Labour government, Councillor Nick Palmer was a member of the Parliament then, during the Blair years and the Brown years, and I note that he was indeed a PPS to the DEFRA Secretary of State for some of that time. So where then was the far-sightedness for matters concerning the water industry by Councillor Palmer, for instance, and his Labour government? If the structure of the water industry and its investment is and was so wrong, why were actions not taken by the Labour government to do something about it when they had the chance? They did not. I also note that Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, was in Godalming at the end of last week. Ed Davey, Madam Mayor, was a member of the cabinet in the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition until 2015. Again, if things are or were so wrong, why did not he and others from his party take actions to do something about it? The answer is that they did not. So I merely want to make the point that it's not just simply a Conservative administration that one can criticise, but bearing in mind the long-term decisions and the long-term nature of what has to be done, I think others are to be criticised as well. However, I wish to make the point that I will be supporting and voting for this recommendation and for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Busby, followed by Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, delighted to see this motion and to see us taking a proactive approach in doing what we can to tackle the issues of failing water infrastructure and raw sewage discharges in the borough. It is quite right that the motion is primarily focused on Thames Water, given the recent inexcusable disruption to supply in and around Godalming, a problem that has also hit my ward, Chiddingfold, in the not too distant past, and the long-standing issues in Cranley, of course. But what I did just want to mention is that residents in parts of the south of the borough, including Chiddingfold, have been similarly poorly served by Southern Water, who provide wastewater and sewage services there. So I hope and trust that the proposed executive working group referred to in point 3 of the motion will look into water and sewage infrastructure issues and the environmental record of all water companies serving the borough and not just Thames Water. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm amused by Councillor Martin's suggestion that decades may pass before we see the delights of privatisation. I might say with Conservative governments, the first 14 years are always the hardest. One can always hope for better things. The reason that the Labour government was not able to renationalise water was because of the state of public finances, which the Conservatives had left. I don't think that the public out there would like us to be exchanging routine party insults at this point. What happened here was so appalling for all residents of all political parties that we need to work together to press Thames Water to give us the assurances that we need. And I would only make the point that the reason why public ownership is to be preferred is because the electorate can then hold the government directly to account. We are in a position of having to ask Thames Water, please be helpful, respond to our request. That is an unsatisfactory situation in terms of democratic accountability and simply in terms of what the public want. That if something is publicly owned and badly run, the public can throw the rascals out, as I hope they may do shortly. However, on this particular issue, I hope that we can all work together to get what we can in terms of binding commitments from Thames Water for all our residents.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers, so we'll come to the vote, which is on the, I beg your pardon, it's been a long night.
Thank you to everyone for your comments. I'm pleased to hear that the motion put forward by councillors Townsend and Follows was accepted by Surrey County Council today. Councillor Townsend gave a passionate testimony of the ongoing situation in Cranley. As we have heard, when these situations have occurred, the support given to residents by Thames Water is simply not good enough. Thank you to Councillor Rubini for your helpful account of the Hazelmere situation, and it's disconcerting that the failures of Thames Water appear to be so systemic. Councillor Williams gave us a nice historical context on Thames Water, which I was grateful for, given my age at the time, and the promises that were made then. It's imperative that we get the answers that we need now for our residents. Thank you to Councillor Goodridge for his comments and for attending the State of the Borough meeting. I agree with you, it's really important that we get answers from Thames Water around how affected residents from villages should receive more logical water distribution. The leader's comments around how we can try and affect change at every possible level of local and national government was also very helpful. I was particularly grateful for Councillor Austin's testimony around the situation in Bramley and Wonersh ward. The prolonged incident for residents there was disgraceful, and I was interested in her comments around compensation. From what I'm aware, the sewage overflow data is incomplete, and that is why we were asking for more information on this. While it is obviously great to hear that a letter has been written by our MP, we will be writing our own letter with our own questions as raised by our residents. I appreciate Councillor Martin's support for the motion and his comments around the awful communication from Thames Water. I won't stray into national politics, and this motion doesn't do so either, but I think the critique of the former Labour government is slightly unfair given the length of time that others have had since being in power. Councillor Busby raised the proposed executive working group, and we will of course be looking at this in a holistic way around all water issues in Waverley. And thank you to Councillor Palmer for his comments around public ownership and democratic accountability. I appreciate everyone's engagement, and I hope that members will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we come to the motion and the amendment that has had general assent. So would all those in favour please show?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's 46 in favour, no abstentions and none against.
Thank you. So that is carried. Come to agenda item number 17, the minutes of the executive. And I move the recommendation that the minutes of the executive meetings held on 3rd and 30th of November be received and noted. Is that agreed?
Point of order. I have indicated to speak on this.
And we come now to the minutes of the audit committee. And I move the recommendation that the minutes of the audit committee meeting held on the 11th of September 2023 be received and noted. Is that agreed? Councillor Hyman, do you have a point of order?
Yes, I have indicated to speak on these items.
I think you are out of time, I'm afraid.
But I left a message on the on the phone number, which is on the front of the in good time, plenty of time.
I don't think there's,
On the front, and confirmed it in writing. So is that not, or is it not okay to phone the committee secretary who's in here, as we are expected to do so, and not finding them there and not being able to get through to anyone, then finding that that it's our problem, not the council's problem? I mean, this was all done properly.
personally, I think if you don't receive an answer to your phone call, you have to try to phone again. So I'm going to say that was out of time. So, yes, please.
Madam Mayor, just for clarity, it's Council Procedure Rule 11.8 that makes this provision. It says that notice in writing, email or telephone message must be given to the Executive Head of Legal and Democratic Services by noon on the day of the meeting. And I'm afraid I didn't receive any notification until 1:24 today from Councillor Hyman by email to the committee services team.
I did leave a message, as it says there, accordingly, so I don't understand why you're in denial.
I'm going to move the recommendation that the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on the 11th of September 2023 be received and noted. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 19, the minutes of the Standards and General Purposes Committee. And that as well, I move the recommendation that the minutes of the meetings held on 2nd of October 2023 be received and noted. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now we come to agenda item number 20, which is the exclusion of press and public. Subject to a motion to exclude the press and public, duly seconded, that the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following matter on the grounds that it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during the item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information, as signified, of the description specified in the relevant paragraphs of the revised Part 1, Schedule 12A to Local Government Act 1972, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that seconded?